jingling. The sound is a needle sewing through the quiet of the night, and every stitch pulls my nerves tighter. It isn't a gentle ring. It's a violent, abrupt chatter, jit, 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 then silence, then again. A metallic nonsense language spoken by something that has forgotten peace. My knuckles are white on the bedsheet. It wasn't like this before it was broken. Silent. Now it seems it will never end. It started with a sign, a flip sign, creaking on a rusty hinge in the middle of a vast flat nowhere. Sundust Lodge, it proclaimed. Nebraska's finest hotel and dining, 50 miles. The building it advertised was a low, slouching thing, its wood siding bleached by sun and scoured by wind. Mud clung to the porch steps like a disease. The man who opened the door was a study in erosion. Gavin. He was all sharp angles and hollows, swimming in a stained t-shirt. His eyes, the color of old whiskey, didn't just look at you, they excavated you, searching for something they could resent. The smell that rolled out past him was complex and awful. Sweet chemical air freshener battling the deep, sour notes of old beer and older loneliness. He didn't speak, just turned and padded inside in grubby socks. I followed, my bag feeling suddenly heavier. The living room was a landfill of quiet despair. Green glass bottles, empty tins, dust motes dancing in the weak light. But as I stepped over the threshold, I saw them. Deep, frantic grooves carved into the bottom of the inside of the door. Parallel tracks dug into the wood by something with determination and claws. They were old, but in this place of neglect, they stood out like a scream. His office was a sarcophagus of order within the chaos. Clean carpet, a heavy desk, and on a shelf, a crucifix. It was large, bronze, the figure of Jesus slumped in a peculiar, awkward agony. The cross was painted to look like wood, but it stood on a real wooden base, dark and thick. It was an expensive thing, utterly at odds with the squalor. Its presence felt less like piety and more like a paperweight holding down a terrible secret. The paperwork was brief. $45, no breakfast, no noise. "Do you keep any pets?" I asked, the scratches on the door floating in my mind. The click of his pen stopped. "No," he said, the word final as a coffin lid. "Why?" I had no good answer. I let it die. My room was a cell, a narrow bed, a window looking onto endless dusk, and a closet. The closet door wouldn't sit right in its frame. That night, after the distant mumble of Gavin's TV had ceased, the silence of the lodge became a presence. It was a heavy, listening silence, and it was in that silence that my curiosity, always my worst companion, woke up. The closet was empty except for a single cardboard box sealed with miles of yellowing packing tape. Scrawled on the side in thick black marker, "Throw out." But it hadn't been thrown out. It had been hidden. Inside, I found a ghost. A photograph of a boy 4 or 5 with hair like summer wheat. He was struggling to hold a wriggling puppy, a giant of a dog even then, its ears soft and flopping. The boy's face was a sculpture of pure, grave focus. Another photo, the same boy years later laughing in the rain, tiny rubber boots planted in a mud puddle. Crayon drawings of the lodge's floor plan, earnest and off-scale. A treasure hoard of boyhood, smooth river stones, a lucky rabbit's foot gone bald. A deck of cards sticky with ancient soda. And at the bottom of it all, in a small wooden box lined with felt, lay a little iron bell. a simple rustic thing meant for a cat or a garden gate. I lifted it and shook it gently. Nothing, not a rattle. The clapper was still frozen to the side, broken. A profound sadness washed over me, colder than the room. This was a shrine to a lost child, a child whose room this had been, a child who had drawn maps of his home, who had loved a dog, who had saved pennies. Where was he now? As if in answer, a sound tore through the lodge. It wasn't the TV. It was a crash so immense it seemed to shake the foundations. Then a thud, a body hitting a wall. I was at my door, ear to the thin wood. From Gavin's office came a wet, strangled sound, gasping, a choking, liquid struggle for air. Then his voice, but not the gruff, dismissive tone from before. This was ragged, stripped raw with a terror so profound it was almost childlike. No, not now. Put him out. You have to put him out. Another crash. The sound of paper fluttering, books hitting the floor. He can't come in, I said he can't. The voice broke into a sob, then hardened into a whisper that carried down the hall with terrifying clarity. A whisper of terrible, intimate madness. I love you. Now come here. It's time. I did not pack. I fled. I shoved my things into my bag, flung open the front door, passing those deep, deep scratches, and ran into the swallowing Nebraska night. For 3 days I walked. The landscape was a meditation in emptiness. I slept fitfully under the vast, star-choked sky, dreaming not of stars, but of the sound of claws on wood, and the sight of a silent bell. On the third evening, I reached a place where 2 dirt roads crossed in a perfect, meaningless X. The sun was a dying ember on the horizon. The wind, my constant companion, suddenly dropped dead. In the absolute stillness, a new sound arrived, jingle, soft, metallic. I turned. They were there, as if they had simply condensed from the twilight. A boy, kneeling in the dust. He wore a bulky black raincoat too large for him and little red galoshes. Beside him, sitting with regal patience, was a dog, a massive, broad-chested creature with a coat the color of dust and shadows. It was the dog from the photograph, fully grown. The boy was drawing in the dirt with a stick, 2 lines across roads. He was mapping the very spot where we stood. The dog's head turned toward me. Its eyes were like pools of dark water. It did not growl. It simply acknowledged. From its neck, from a beautiful worn brown leather collar, came the soft jingle. A sense of unreality washed over me. The air grew colder. Hello? My voice was a dry leaf rustle. The boy's hand stopped. The dog's low whine was the only sound. Slowly, with a stiffness that was not a child's stiffness, the boy began to turn his head. I saw the honey blonde hair first, then the profile of a cheek that should have been round with youth. But it wasn't. The left side of his face from temple to jaw was subtly, irrevocably altered. Not grotesque, but warped, as if the bone beneath had settled wrong. A fine white seam of a scar traveled from his hairline down to his cheek, pulling the corner of his eye down just a fraction, giving him a look of permanent, gentle sadness. One of his eyes was a clouded, beautiful blue. The other was milky, seeing nothing in this world. He looked at me, through me, with an expression of infinite, weary loneliness. He pointed a small, dirty finger at his drawing in the dirt. He traced one of the lines. Then he pointed to himself, to the dog, and finally his finger stabbed insistently at the other line, the one leading back the way I had come, back toward the Sundust Lodge. He wasn't asking for directions. He was showing me his journey, and he was asking for permission. I understood. With a certainty that chilled my soul, I understood. I pointed west, down the long dark road toward the distant speck that was the lodge. I gave him the way home. The effect was immediate. The massive dog let out a soft, breathy woof and stood, its tail giving a single slow wag. The boy's solemn face did not smile, but the terrible sadness in his good eyes seemed to deepen, to mix with a resolve as old as the hills. He stepped close to the dog and fumbled with its collar. The jingling became frantic. His small hands worked, and then he pulled something free. He turned to me, took my numb hand, and pressed the object into my palm. It was the little iron bell from the box, cold and smeared with earth. Before I could speak, before I could even look down, I felt the air shift. I looked up. The crossroads were empty. Just two dusty roads under a purple sky. A final faint jingle seemed to linger on the wind, fading into the growing dark. I stood there for a long time. Then I turned and ran north toward the distant glow of a town called Hyannis. The bell clutched so tightly in my hand I feared the metal would fuse to my skin. I found a room, a clean, quiet room with a landlady who smelled of lavender, not decay. I thought I was safe. I thought the horror was behind me, a story I had witnessed but escaped. I was wrong. That was 3 nights ago. The bell is not broken. Not anymore. As I lay in this clean, safe bed, it begins. First a faint tinkle like a tease. Then the jit returns, louder, angrier, a gleeful, chattering rage. It shakes on my nightstand now, all on its own, as if an invisible, furious hand is wielding it. It is the sound of a debt being collected. The sound of a door locked for years finally being kicked open. It is the sound of them coming home. And Gavin, in his dark, sour office, must be hearing it too. The jingling right outside his door. Then the slow, heavy scratch of claws on wood, not trying to get out, trying to get in. The bell shrieks and shrieks in my dark room. It is a celebration, it is a requiem, and I must lie here and listen to it all.